This morning I wanted to, this is such an interesting topic, and actually Sarah had suggested a more interesting title, which I thought, well, that might be a little risky. But it's this idea of a lot of us who end up in leadership positions in academia as women are usually the first in that position as a woman. And what does that mean, and what lessons have I learned from it that maybe I can chat with you about. But I'd like for this to be interactive, if we can do it that way. And also, I'm trying not to make this be about me, because that's not the point. I think it's better to have a discussion that's more general. But I like this quote. I found Bonnie Blair. You remember Bonnie Blair? She was an Olympic athlete, won a whole boatload of gold medals, and she was a speed skater, okay? And she said, winning doesn't always mean being first. Winning means you're doing better than you've done before. So being first or not is not ever been, I think, the goal of any of the women leaders that you see in these positions. Certainly you, Helene, you're not going to UC Davis for any reason like that. You wouldn't be the first anyway, because they've had other women. But we don't do that for that reason. It just happens to be that way. We're trying to do better than we've done before, and we're trying to do good things by the positions that we get to. Well, I compiled this table. I found it to be very interesting. I wanted to get a hold of some data that would give us some perspective as to where are we as women in leadership positions. And what I did is I looked at the U.S. News and World Report's rankings, 2013, and looked at the top 100 public institutions. And I recognize Cornell is private, but public institutions that are land-grant universities, because it's really where you see a lot more land-grant universities. And of the 37 land-grant universities that are ranked in that top 100 public institutions by U.S. News and World Reports, this is kind of the breakdown of where you see women in leadership positions. So, for example, University of Arizona, Connecticut, Michigan State, UC Davis, and Wisconsin, those 5 institutions have women presidents, okay? 5 out of 37 is 13.5%, okay? The first 4, Arizona, Connecticut, Michigan State, UC Davis, the women presidents that they have, they're the first to be a woman president in those institutions. University of Wisconsin, interestingly enough, they're on their 3rd woman president, which is amazing, okay? And then when you look at the deans of colleges of agriculture, and here's where Helene, you would certainly be in there. I've got UC Davis because there's a woman serving as interim right now, but now we can take the interim part off, okay? But you've got, how many is that? 7 colleges of agriculture from those 37 land-grant universities where women are the dean, okay? Now, University of Tennessee, I put it in there, but the dean of the College of Agriculture there is not really the top agriculture official there. They have a division of agriculture, and there's a man that's over that, okay? But without going into any more detail than that, just to show you that, frankly, I mean, those are pretty low numbers. They really are. There was a report published not very long ago just in terms of women in positions as president of universities and colleges in the United States, and it's about 26%, 26.3% of colleges and universities have a woman as president, okay? It's higher than when you look at land-grant institutions, the top land-grant institutions. But it's still pretty low. I mean, on this day and age, we are in the year 2013, almost 2014. And why is that? Okay? Just to have some fun here, I don't know if you saw this in the news the other day. It caught my eye. There's a very recent study. It just was accepted in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, November 1st, and it was all over the news. I don't know if you caught it. That these researchers did a study at the University of Pennsylvania where they compared the neural connections of men versus women, and they had almost 1,000 subjects, and they looked at They're scans of the neural connections. And the top two horizontally with the blue connections being depicted is the brains of men, okay? And the bottom two is the brains of women. And what the study says is that there's these direct connections that happen in general with men's brains, where you have the connections going from back to front, and of women from left to right. And based on what we know of the brain functions and structure, what they say in the study is that what it shows is that men are more prone to be able to make a connection between an observation and an action, which is really where you go from the back to the front of the brain, versus when you go left to right or right to left, where it's making a connection between intuition and communication and reaction, and it's back and forth in terms of the thought process that takes place. Instead of just you see something, you act. There's a lot more thought that goes on, a lot more interaction in your brain. So I don't know what that means. I'll leave you to interpret what that means. But another study that I saw, and this one, I didn't put the year, this was this year as well. University of Tennessee, they interviewed these 6 deans of agriculture colleges, as a matter of fact. And they did some other things, and what they came up with is that it seems like women leaders tend to exhibit what they call transformational leadership more often than not, and men leaders tend to exhibit transactional leadership. And I'm not a scholar of all these things. I'm a food microbiologist. I'm just going to tell you right now. So I'm getting into territory that is not my expertise. But in that same paper, they define transformational leaders as leaders who state what the goals should be, okay, develop plans to pursue those goals, and then innovate in pursuit of those goals. Even if their organizations are already generally successful, they don't really need to come up with any new ideas, but they do anyway. And you can tell, going back to the neural connections, the connectome, as they call it, where you're having all of these thoughts going back and forth, and the creativity gets stimulated. Transactional leaders is more of a linear kind of a situation where they assign a subordinate responsibilities of, okay, you're supposed to do these things. Then they reward the subordinate for meeting those objectives or goals. And if they fail to meet the objectives, they correct them and, help them along or what have you. But it's just a different way of approaching things. So given that, I would say to you, or I would ask you the question to be thinking about, would you think that women make potentially good leaders or bad leaders? Okay? So hold on to that thought. We'll talk about that in just a second. There was a survey done by a consulting firm, and they asked people, what are the qualities of a great leader? Okay? Vision is number one. Energizing people, or the ability to really get people, because that's really what leadership is about, if you think about it, is getting people to go along with a vision that you have set, so that it's a team approach and you're all rowing in the same direction, as they say, going together to attain some goals. And people are not forced or coerced to do so, they're energized to do so. They want to do it. Yeah, a leader makes it possible for people to want to follow and do what is the collective idea of what needs to be done, okay? So vision and energizing people, very important. Communication, of course. Charisma, there's got to be some charisma there, and competence, but look how competence is pretty low. And why do you think that is? Why is competence seen as a low priority? And this is people's opinion. This is not necessarily fact, but it's what people perceive as the most to the least important. Why do you think people don't place that much importance on competence? Yes, sir.
I think many good leaders sometimes don't necessarily have to be competent themselves, particularly in highly specialized stuff. You just need to find the right people to get it done.
That's exactly right.
That's the impression people have.
That is exactly right. You don't have to know it all. You really don't. You don't have to. Being a leader doesn't mean that you're the expert on everything. Who is, first and foremost? But if you're smart enough to surround yourself with people who are competent, all you have to be competent about is the act of leadership. Okay, that's what you have to be competent about. Okay, so would you ask yourself that question then, given what we just learned about differences maybe between men and women, etc.? You can see that both men and women, can be great leaders, maybe with different approaches. When you think about leading, whether it's in higher education or in business or wherever it is, you're not just leading your subordinates, which is the bottom right, okay? You're also leading yourself, because you're learning as you're going, okay? You're leading your peers, because you've got to interact with other people you're not an island, you've got to interact with others. And you're leading your boss. You probably have heard about this, that you have to lead your boss. You have to convince your boss that what you're doing is the right thing. So you, in a very perhaps gentle way, you're leading your boss, okay, to conclude what you have already concluded, but let it be their idea, That's how it is. So would you say, again, ask yourself this question: are women leaders well equipped to do this kind of thing, based on what we've learned? Yes?
The other question would be, do women leaders lead the boss when the boss is a man that's established in the system?
Very true. Very true. All right. So this is just my musings. Okay, there's, I'm sure, a lot of different reasons, and I want to ask you what you think, okay? But I thought of two reasons, possible reasons, for lack of significant progress in terms of not having more women as leaders, as presidents of land-grant universities, as deans of colleges of agriculture than we already have, okay? One reason, not enough qualified women in the pipeline, right? There's just not enough of us out there, so it's slim pickings, so whenever they do a search, they can't find any qualified women to apply. Well, I suppose that's possible. Or it's also possible that there are qualified women who just don't throw their hat in the ring, right? They don't want that job, okay? They think, well, that's going to be difficult for me to do with my family and with lots of other things, and maybe they're just not wanting to make all the sacrifices that need to be made when you're in those positions, okay? So that's one thought. Another one is that maybe there's not enough support for appointing women to leadership positions, not enough support in terms of search committees or the actual decision makers, boards of regents, whoever it is that makes a decision, either because of stereotyping, okay, where they think, well, it's a woman, can't possibly be a good leader, or because of fear of change. Ooh, if we appoint a woman, it's going to be a different kind of leadership, not that, observation, action kind of a methodology, but somebody who's going to really do it differently. And maybe we don't want that. We're not used to that. We're afraid of it. So what do you think? Let me ask you a question. What do you think? Is there anything else that I'm missing here that, in your opinion, might be some potential reasons why we don't have more than just the, 13% and so forth? Because that's really low. That really is low. Because when you look at 13%, you might think, well, that's not bad. That means 87% are white men. Just yesterday, or actually this morning, there's going to be an announcement made. University of Missouri, Mizzou, is hiring a new chancellor, which is their equivalent to a president, and it's a white male. Okay, Virginia Tech is looking for a president, and the rumor, and I know this because I'm a Hokie, I'm a graduate of Virginia Tech. The rumor is that it's this white male from another university. So why does this keep happening? So what do you think? Let me ask you. Probably as all those things. Okay. Anything else that I'm missing, do you think?
It's kind of up there, but just the networking, it's like, that's who's in the network. It's not just who's in the pipeline, but it's who's in the network.
Who's in the network? Who you know, that's right. The connections, that's very true. Yes, ma'am.
It would be
interesting in your table with the presidents and the deans of College of Agriculture, maybe to have a column for provosts.
Yeah.
Or the equivalent
True.
position, because I was on a search committee for Cornell's president some years ago, and the general sense was you really, being a provost is a very important qualification for being a president.
Sure. And how many provosts are women, is your point?
Yeah, that was the thing that was interesting to see as
Yeah.
well.
Very true.
Because that's often viewed as a
Yeah, that's correct. No, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. This little pyramid there, that's just from the business world. They have the same kind of issues as we do in academia. Women in business, the bottom layer there is the U.S. labor force is about 47% women. And yet, when you go up there, there's about 51% women in management and so forth. Then executive officers, 14%. Seats at boards of directors, about 16%. And then when you get up to CEO, it's very low. Okay, so they have the same issues as we do. And I think, Sarah, you're right. There's you're not, if you're not in the network of people that can help you and that can point you to things and so that you can start stepping up on all the right levels to make it to provost and then make it to president, it makes it very difficult. So this was me a long time ago, obviously. I can go into great detail, but I don't know that it serves us well. But I'd be happy to answer any questions. But I wanted to share with you, there's three things that when I looked at it in retrospect and started to think about what to talk about here with you this morning, I thought, well, what are some things that were key for me, okay, to get up to these levels, okay? Because I certainly did not start out that way. I wanted to just be a research scientist, just be a professor at a university, teach students, do my research, that's it. I never thought, oh, I want to be an administrator. Never, okay? But when I started my career at Iowa State University as a professor, I was in my department at Iowa State University, I was the only female, only Hispanic, only person under the age of 40 in that department. So it was rough. And so I thought to myself, I am just a fish out of water here. So I started to look around and make connections proactively with people who became mentors. A lot of them men, to be honest with you. Most of them men who became my mentors. And why are people mentors of anyone else? It's because obviously they're giving people, but they're people who see the potential in someone, right? And they see the value in spending time with that person. So I tried to make myself valuable to them. I was a food microbiologist, and there was a lot of activity in food safety research at that time. And so I gravitated towards the meat scientists who didn't have a microbiology background but needed it in proposals. So I thought, well, here I am. And so I collaborated with them, and it worked out really well for my career. The second thing is I forced myself out of my comfort zone a lot. Okay? It's very easy to just sit in your office, it really is. And you're busy. It's not that you're twiddling your thumbs. You're busy. You're writing proposals, you're writing papers, you're teaching, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do as a faculty member or as a project leader, whatever it is you're doing, you're busy. You are busy. But you have to force yourself out of your comfort zone. You have to think outside of yourself for the greater good of the organization where you are, whether that's an institute or a department or a university or whatever it may be, and say, what can I do to contribute and go outside of the norm and go to meetings and meet people and really have them get to know you and have your department head or whoever's your boss know that you're interested in these things, so that when they're appointing people to committees, you are someone that they know will be able to do this and is interested in doing this. It's a lot of work, okay? I'll tell you a very brief story how I got to Washington, D.C. it's not because I was some big donor to President George W. Bush, because I was just a professor. I didn't have any money, all right? So I was minding my own business. But what I did is I wanted to do an initiative in the state of Texas, have the legislature of the state fund an initiative on food safety, okay, my field. And so I tried to do that through the right channels of the university. Didn't work out because it was all these cattlemen and all these, ranch people that, you know how that goes there. Hard group to talk to, okay? And here I am, this little Hispanic woman. So it didn't work out. But then I thought, for the next legislative session, I've learned some lessons. I'm going to get ready for the next session and start a lot sooner to try to get to know these people. And the first person I thought I needed to get to know was the Commissioner of Agriculture of the state of Texas. I thought, if I go to meet her, and it's a woman, and tell her and convince her, then maybe she will open doors for me, okay? So I go to meet with her, and she says, yeah, absolutely right, I'll help you. A couple months later, I get a call from the White House. The president was looking to appoint someone, a food safety expert at USDA, and because he was coming from Texas, he called Commissioner Combs and said, do you know someone who's food safety here in Texas? Elsa Murano. She never would have said those words, Elsa Murano, if I hadn't gone to see her. She wouldn't have known who I was. So you see, you gotta push yourself and force yourself to go meet people, because you never know where there's an opportunity, okay? So one thing led to another, and that's how I made it there. So forcing yourself out of your comfort zone for sure. And then learning by observing leaders at work. Great leaders, and you say, hey, I'm gonna be like that guy in these ways. And not so great leaders, I'm never gonna do that, okay? I mean, this sounds simple, but it's true. Being very observant of people around you, whoever's your boss and your boss's boss, and people that you see in various positions, and observing what it takes. So for example, great leaders, and I took this from a website, but I completely agree with these 12 activities, if you will, of a great leader. And you've got them into 3 categories: visioning and setting an example, empowering and energizing, which we talked about, and then leading a team. A great leader will create an inspiring vision and shared values. A great leader will lead change, will lead by example, will demonstrate confidence, okay? Very important things to do. Inspire and energize people, empower people, communicate openly, listen, support, and help. Involve everyone with a team approach. Coach and bring out the best in your people. Encourage group decision. Monitor progress, but don't micromanage. All of these things, I think we all know. When you read them, you say, yeah, those are great. That's exactly what a great leader does. And you've got to be prepared to do it. When I was in DC, I'll tell you another brief story, and maybe that's what makes this talk more interesting, is when I tell you stories. I was brand new there, and as it happens in Washington, D.C., if you've ever worked in D.C., you've got very dedicated professionals who are career government employees, okay? Bureaucrats could be a term, but they're dedicated people in their field, whether it's at USAID, USDA, Health and Human Services, wherever they are. I mean, that's their career. They care about what they're doing. And then here you show up as a political appointee, as I did, and they're used to seeing every 4 years or so a new crop of people. And they just kind of say, well, I don't know what that person's about, but I'm going to just wait them out and yes them to death, and they'll go away soon enough, and they don't know what they're doing. We know what we're doing. So how do you make believers out of these people? How do you help them go forward and so forth? Well, you've got to inspire them, and you've got to lead by example. So in this particular case, we had an outbreak of foodborne illness, ground beef, big deal. And we were meeting with a company, huge company, meat packing plant, and there was a CEO, his lawyers, all of that, and it was me and then my people at USDA. I was brand new, and so I say to the CEO, well, you're going to have to, according to our records, because you contaminated one batch of production with the previous day's production, we can't be sure where the contamination started. Therefore, instead of just calling you to recall this much product, you're going to have to go back several months. And it's going to be 26 million pounds. Wow, that's a lot of money. That's a huge thing. So the lawyer, the CEO sitting right there, says, well, Dr. Murano, I'm going to recommend to my client that we don't do that, because you haven't absolutely proven to me that the contamination started, months ago. And I said, well, but I can't say that it didn't, because you took leftover batch from one day and put it on the other one, and I don't know where it started. They said, well, still, we're not going to do it. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. Then I'm going to put out a food safety alert in the media and say that we recommend that you recall this product, but you chose not to. All right, meeting ended. My people were looking at me like, oh my gosh. So 20 minutes later, I get a call from the CEO saying, Dr. Murano, we're going to recall the 26 million pounds. Of course, of course. But the point is, at that moment, I'm telling you, and I didn't know it then, but at that moment, they said, she's for real. We're gonna work together just fine. And we got to do great things as a result, okay? So you've got to be able to do that. Not so great leaders. Here's 12 steps of not so great leaders. Inability to organize detail, very disorganized. Unwillingness to do what you would ask someone else to do, okay? Oh, you go and do that, but I'm over here, I'm the leader, you get your hands dirty. You have to be down in the trenches with your people, you really do. The expectation of pay for what you know instead of what you do. That's what a bad leader does, okay? They pay people for what they know instead of what they can do. They fear competition from others. They lack creativity in setting goals and planning. The I syndrome, they take credit for everything instead of giving the credit to their people. You give credit to your people, it's going to come back to you anyway. It really is. You don't have to, because everybody will say, oh my gosh, how smart is she that she hired those people. Overintelligence, going and spending lots of money on themselves, disloyalty to colleagues, emphasis on authority, leading by fear instead of by encouraging, emphasis of title instead of knowledge and expertise, lack of understanding of the destructive effects of a negative environment. In other words, knowing that there's problems in the office and just letting it ride and letting it ride because it's hard work to fix problems, and lack of common sense. Okay, so these are kind of the top 12 that I've observed are what poor leaders do. So, on being first, as Sarah said, I was first Hispanic, first woman director of the Center for Food Safety at Texas A&M, first Hispanic undersecretary for Food Safety at USDA, first Hispanic, first woman Vice Chancellor and Dean of Ag at Texas A&M, first Hispanic, first woman president of the university, first Hispanic and first woman now director of the Borlaug Institute at A&M. And you say to yourself, my gosh, when are we gonna stop needing to say you're the first this and first that? I wish that wasn't the case anymore, okay? And Helene, you're going to UC Davis, you won't be the first woman Dean of Ag, that's good. That's a good thing, okay? But when you are in those positions, okay, people are watching you. People are wanting to know if you're for real. And so you have to show what you got. And we were able to do some great things. That top chart on the right, you see all those squiggly lines. Those are different, their foodborne illness is caused by different organisms. The red one is E. coli 015787. You may have heard about that organism. It's the one that's affiliated or associated with ground beef contamination, okay? Undercooked burgers and so forth. That circled part, that's when I was in Washington, okay? And after I left, it went back up. A guy took over after I left, so I don't know if that's, I'm sure that's not the reason, but anyway, but that was a huge amount of effort, and it was because of the people, There's 10,000 meat inspectors in this country. One person cannot make that difference. It's got to be a group effort for sure, okay? But you can't just rest on your laurels. You have to continually, care and feed it. And if you don't, there it goes again, okay? The bottom chart there shows you when I was president of Texas A&M, one of the things that you worry about as president is the funding that comes from the state as a public institution. You guys don't have to worry about that so much here at Cornell, thank goodness, but it's a big deal, okay? I mean, we get money from tuition, but we get money from the state of Texas in this case. And we have a legislative session every other year in Texas. So you see there how so I've got 2 years at a time. The trend was going up. The highest level of funding is when I was president. And then it went back down. And a guy took over after me. So I'm just saying. And you wonder, okay, what is it? What makes a difference? I think, honestly, is that because women have that ability to really work in a team, maybe somewhat better than men, and I'm generalizing here because there's some great men leaders, obviously, wonderful, and some not so good women leaders, okay? But it's that ability to get the team to move forward together that's, I think, makes a difference in a lot of cases. So some of the lessons that I learned, you have to get to know people so they get to know you, okay? You cannot, as I said, sit in your office. And you have to get out there, and when you are given the position of leadership, it's a lot of skeptics, so you've got to have them get to know you as a person. It's very easy to objectify an individual, say, well, that's a Hispanic woman, therefore she must be this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. And stereotyping you right away. If they get to know you as a person, which means you have to be in people's face and you have to go to events that maybe you're uncomfortable going to. When I first became Dean of the College of Ag in Texas A&M, I was just coming back from Washington, and I had a reporter ask me, Dr. Murano, how are you gonna handle these cowboy, agriculture people in Texas? You're a Hispanic woman. And I said, how anybody would handle them? What do you mean? I come from an agricultural background. I'm a reasonable person. I believe in hard work ethic, like a lot of agricultural, people do. So I found that an interesting question. I don't fault the reporter, but I think it just speaks to the fact that he was immediately thinking, you're over here in this category. Right, Helene? Don't act like the first anything, okay? You just do your job like anybody else, and let other people worry about how to label you. And as I say here, recognize that there will always be skeptics. Even when you're doing great things, there's some people who are never going to accept you just the way it is. There's a lot of people who are going to be very supportive, and then there's some people who are going to be not sure, and then you show them by the results, and you win them over, okay? There I was when I was first appointed president. It looks like one of those, what was it, Sesame Street used to be one of these things does not belong here. That's kind of me with all those cadets at Texas A&M who were, wonderful young people, but certainly not much that I had in common with them in terms of their background and so forth, but we could come to a certain understanding for sure and like each other. But most importantly, and going back to the joy of being first, is to stay true to yourself. You have a certain set of core values, okay, who reflect who you are or who you want to be. You have to stay true to them no matter what. If you try to be somebody else, if you try to be something else, you're going to fail and you're going to be miserable. Even if you succeed, you're going to, inside, you're not going to be joyous, you'll be miserable because you're not you, okay? That is what brings you joy, no matter what the circumstances, is that at the end of the day, you're doing what you think is the right thing, what you think is best, what is in keeping with your values. If it's not in keeping with others, that's how it goes. And you move on and do other things if you need to. Okay, so I think that's all I had because I wanted to make sure we had a couple minutes for questions.